Extremely Wicked, Shockingly Evil and Vile, the Netflix movie about serial killer Ted Bundy, is pretty upsetting. It explores how Bundy fooled many of the people around him with his charm and good looks until all of his evil doing caught up with him. But here are some things the Ted Bundy movie gets wrong. A lot of what you see in Extremely Wicked, Shockingly Evil and Vile is a condensed version of real-life events. The fictionalized version of Bundy's capture and trial isn't all that far off from the truth, which makes sense considering director Joe Berlinger was already extremely familiar with all the gory details. It's actually his second Ted Bundy film. He also directed Conversations with a Killer, the Ted Bundy Tapes, a Netflix documentary based on actual recordings of Bundy's confessions.
Creating an identity is not terribly difficult to do at all.
Since life doesn't move along at a brisk and tidy pace, any film based on a true story inevitably combines, embellishes, or pares down real events. For example, in Extremely Wicked, Bundy is arrested for the first time after a bag of suspicious evidence is found in the backseat of his car. His arrest is immediately followed by an interrogation, and then a scene in which Carole Ann picks him out of a police lineup. It feels like the whole process lasts for only a few days, but in actuality, charging Bundy was a much longer process. He was indeed pulled over in August 1975 when officers found handcuffs and other suspicious objects in his car, but they actually let him go because they didn't have enough evidence to hold him. It wasn't until Bundy sold his car the following month that police got what they needed to charge him with a crime. Authorities seized the car from the buyer and found strands of hair that linked him to some of the missing women they were investigating. Duranch didn't actually pick him out of a lineup until October 1975.
When Ted was brought in for a lineup, he had changed his appearance completely from the few days before.
In Extremely Wicked, there's an initial trial for the aggravated kidnapping of Carole Ann, followed by an epic trial for the Florida State University murders and attacks. That trial takes place in Miami, and it ends with a conviction and a death sentence. But the real Bundy actually was put on trial 3 times, not just 2. Following a 1979 trial for the Florida State University murders and attacks, a separate trial in 1980 revolved around the murder of 12-year-old Kimberly Leach, who was reportedly strangled a month after Bundy's murderous crime spree at Florida State University. During the 3rd trial, Bundy pled not guilty by reason of insanity, but it didn't help. The jury returned a guilty verdict and he received a second death sentence. It's clear why Extremely Wicked omitted that 3rd trial. It would have felt redundant. But plenty of material from the final trial makes for fascinating viewing, and the filmmakers folded its major events into the trial we saw. That outlandish marriage proposal to a witness in open court? It actually happened at the Leach trial in Orlando, not Miami. And yes, that act made the wedding legal.
Will you marry me?
Your Honor.
Yes.
Ted Bundy and the woman he eventually married, Carole Ann Boone, obviously had plenty of conversations that nobody ever actually heard, so any dialogue between them in Extremely Wicked is highly fictionalized, if not completely made up. The timing of Boone's pregnancy in the film doesn't quite align with the facts either. Boone became pregnant during conjugal visits she made after he was convicted, not before. Boone divorced Bundy in 1986 and moved back to Washington with the couple's daughter and a son from a previous marriage. Some of Boone's acquaintances have said she felt betrayed by Bundy's eventual confessions. According to People, Boone stopped visiting Bundy during the last 2 years of his life. That's an understandable move, since it wasn't just about her anymore. By that point, she also had a young daughter to protect. One scene near the end of the film is completely made up. When Elizabeth Klepfer visits Bundy prior to his execution, she shows him a photograph of the decapitated corpse of one of his victims.
What happened to her head?
Bundy tries selling her on some lame excuse, but she's not having it. So then he quite literally spells it out for her, and for us, writing hacksaw in the foggy glass that separates them. It's a shocking, emotional moment, but it didn't really happen. According to Cosmopolitan, there's no evidence that Klepfer ever visited Bundy before his execution. Director Joe Berlinger even admits the scene is a total fabrication. What really happened is rather anticlimactic in comparison. Bundy's confession wasn't really a confession at all, and he didn't make it in person. After his arrest in Florida, he reportedly told Klepfer over the phone that he was driven by, quote, a force. According to Vanity Fair, he told her, "I just couldn't contain it. I fought it for a long, long time. It got too strong." Extremely Wicked, Shockingly Evil and Vile is a film that generally keeps the cliches to a minimum, but one scene stands out for some alarmingly on-the-nose foreshadowing. Bundy and Klepper find themselves at a dog adoption center, and you'll never guess what happens next. This definitely didn't happen in real life. In an interview with Esquire, director Joe Berlinger says he included the scene because, quote, animals know. He added, when the dog did not get along with Bundy, that's a clue, but it's not like finding a knife. I did my own interpretation of having some clues along the way. In the film, Elizabeth Klepper is comforted by her coworker Jerry, portrayed by Haley Joel Osment. Jerry eventually becomes Liz's protector and confidant, and he tries to help her see the truth about her monstrous ex-boyfriend. But according to Oxygen, Jerry isn't a real person. At best, he's a composite of several people she knew. It's likely that he's based on someone named Hank, a man Klepper was romantically involved with for a while. In her memoir, Klepper says she met Hank at an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting, writing, "Although we didn't have a lot in common other than our recovery from alcoholism, he made me feel safe. He began to stay with me even at night." Hank reportedly had a few altercations with Bundy over the phone, much like the one we see between Bundy and Jerry in the film.
Can you tell her that I love her?
Klepper's continued correspondence with Bundy evidently became a point of contention between her and Hank, although no one really knows how their relationship panned out. In one scene in Extremely Wicked, Bundy gives Klepper a copy of Papillon, an autobiographical novel by Henry Charrière about a man who's been falsely convicted of murder. Bundy is highly insistent that she read the book.
It's about this guy who's wrongfully convicted of a terrible, terrible crime, and he gets sentenced to life, but he didn't do it.
Eventually, Bundy manages to give her a copy of the book as a gift, and at one point she's even seen reading it. According to Esquire, there's no mention of Papillon in Klepper's memoir, and the storyline was likely invented to provide some more foreshadowing. John Malkovich plays Judge Edward D. Cowart, a character who's a little bit over the top. He calls Bundy nicknames, compliments his attire, and tells him he's good at lawyering. It turns out the real-life Cowart actually was a little bit over the top too. According to USA Today, a lot of Malkovich's dialogue actually comes directly from court records, including the odd praise he lavished upon Bundy toward the end of the trial.
You'd have made a good lawyer. I would have loved to have you practice in front of me. But you went a different way, partner.
The film's name also comes from something Cowart said during Bundy's second trial, when he characterized Bundy's crimes as
extremely wicked, shockingly evil, vile, and the product of a design to inflict a high degree of pain.
But not everything Malkovich says comes directly from court documents. He reportedly improvised a line or two. For example, at one point, he admonishes court spectators after they cheer for Ted Bundy.
You are not waiting for the Flipper and Friends show at SeaWorld. It is a capital murder case.
Well, at least it sounds like something Cowart might have said, so at least Malkovich knew the character he was playing. Extremely Wicked, Shockingly Evil, and Vile skims past a lot of Ted Bundy and Elizabeth Klepper's life together. Based on the film, their relationship looks like rather smooth sailing. Birthday parties, snowball fights, bike riding lessons with Klepper's daughter, the stuff movie montages are made of.
How the heck did you get so smart?
I get it from my mom.
You do, don't you?
What we don't see is the bad stuff, and there was reportedly plenty of it. According to Newsweek, Bundy was verbally and emotionally abusive. Klepper's out-of-print 1981 memoir, The Phantom Prince, My Life with Ted Bundy, written under the pseudonym Elizabeth Kendall, paints a far bleaker picture of their relationship. Klepper said he'd sometimes lock her out of the house, and he once threatened to break her neck after she confronted him about some items that he'd stolen. He reportedly physically abused her once, too. She writes, "I was drunk. I couldn't remember what we were arguing about, but I kept telling Ted to, go ahead and hit me, go ahead. Finally, he slapped me." However, she also denied that he was a violent person. When we argued, he was always calm and reasonable. I could count on the fingers of one hand the times that Ted had lost his temper since I'd known him. But Bundy reportedly did try to kill Klepper once, and he even admitted it to her after he was arrested. According to E! News, Bundy left her sleeping on a hide-a-bed in front of the fireplace one night after she'd been drinking. Before slipping out, he closed the damper and put a towel under the crack in the door. Klepper could have died from smoke inhalation, but she woke up coughing and managed to clear the smoke and put out the fire. In Extremely Wicked, Elizabeth Klepper tells Bundy that she's the one who called the police and reported him, because of his physical resemblance to a police sketch and the fact that he drove a Volkswagen, the same kind of car the suspect drove, according to eyewitnesses.
I'm the one who gave your name to the police.
In reality, Klepfer had much more than that to go on. According to Esquire, Klepfer found a number of items that potentially linked him to the recent murders and disappearances in Seattle. For example, she found plaster of Paris in one of Bundy's desk drawers. In her 1981 memoir, Klepfer wrote, "Now I keep thinking about the cast the guy at Lake Sammamish was wearing. What a perfect weapon it would make for clubbing someone on the head." She also reportedly discovered a hatchet tucked away inside his car. In the Ted Bundy tapes, Klepfer claimed she found a few pairs of women's underwear and a bowl full of other people's keys inside Bundy's apartment. In Ann Rule's The Stranger Beside Me, Klepfer also claimed Bundy kept a knife in the glove box of her car, revealing sometimes it was there, sometimes it was gone. According to Pop Sugar, actor Zac Efron wore fake teeth in order to portray Ted Bundy, with director Joe Berlinger telling the website, "The only thing we did is we put in false lower teeth to match Bundy's, because bite mark evidence plays a role in how he was ultimately convicted." However, modern forensic science has more or less rejected bite mark evidence. In fact, a forensic scientist told Oxygen, "To say that Ted Bundy is the source of this bite mark based only on a comparison of his teeth to the impression is a scientifically impossible statement to make." At any rate, Extremely Wicked gets that part of the story correct. The jury was very much swayed by the bite mark evidence. What the film gets wrong is the scene in which Bundy cross-examines Richard Souveron, the forensic odontologist who provided the bite mark testimony. It was actually Bundy's defense attorney, Ed Harvey, who tried to discredit Souveron, asking, "Analyzing bite marks is part art and part science, isn't it?" Souveron reportedly replied, quote, "I think that's a fair statement." That junk science may have been instrumental in convicting one of the world's most notorious serial killers, but it doesn't make it any less of a discredited practice today.